Soldiers have known throughout the centuries that there is a strategic advantage to taking the high ground. Prior to the invention of the airplane early in the 20th century, finding the high ground was a strategic advantage no matter how large or small forces could be. High ground is easier to defend and easier to hold on to. That's a lesson that Robert E. Lee learned the hard way at Gettysburg. That has led at least one scholar to suggest that Psalm 121 started out as a soldier's song, a soldier who looks up to the high ground and the protective covering that it offers. King David moved the capital of his people to Jerusalem, which is in the hills on top. And he also moved the Ark of the Covenant, first in the tabernacle, and then in the temple under his son Solomon, making it both the political and spiritual center. So it might have been a song that soldiers would have recited to themselves, thinking about how Jerusalem and the God of Jerusalem was their central strength and their stronghold. The inscription above the psalm in our Bibles lists this and the other psalms around it as psalms of ascents. The inscriptions were added so long ago, even ancient rabbis didn't know exactly what they meant. But the leading theory is that this was a part of Psalms that was used to be sung by pilgrims as they were going to Jerusalem during times of festival. Very short songs that would be easy to memorize. And there are different theories as to how they might have been utilized. One is that you might have had a leader singing in line, and then the congregation, the other pilgrims, would repeat that same line back. Another is that some of the shorter ones, like this one, would have been so familiar. The leaders would have had a certain part, maybe the priest, heading up in front of the Ark of the Covenant, marching back into the city. And then the people, the pilgrims, would have responded. It's easy to see that with Psalm 121. The priest would have said to the congregation, "I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come?" And then the pilgrims would state back, "My help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth." That last phrase is one that makes its way into the Apostles' Creed, as we affirm every week belief in a God who created heavens and the earth. A soldier would have reason to be alert and to be afraid of the enemy that would surround him. And pilgrims and just travelers in that day would have had reason to be wary too. There were bandits and thieves who would think nothing of taking advantage of helpless pilgrims on their way, people who are not strong and easily preyed upon. There are wild animals that might have existed in the woods. That area was much more heavily populated with vegetation back in that time than it would be today. It talks about the natural dangers of the sun beating down on people by day. They and we would have known about the dangers of the sun, burns, sunstroke, dehydration, things of that nature. And it also talks about the things that the moon can do to you. That might be linked with the idea that the ancients had that the moon was responsible for certain mental disorders. The word lunacy has lunar at its root. That's where it comes from. And we could easily dismiss this as just something that the ancients, primitive and superstitious people believed. But I've had some fascinating conversations when I've taught this in Bible study. And I've had people in the class who were emergency room nurses or prison guards talking about the way the behavior changed around the full moon. A classmate of mine in college grew up on a beef cattle ranch. And she claimed that the cows were much more likely to give birth on the night of a full moon than they were at other times. I asked one of my parishioners who was a cattle farmer about this, and he said he had not noticed any difference. So maybe it's just Georgia cows. But the nighttime, the darkness also represents what is hidden, what is out there that we might need to be fearful of. Fear is an emotion, and like all emotions, it is a gift from God. Fear is our first line of defense. Fear is what says there may be something around that curve you should be concerned with. That rustling you heard over there in the vegetation, that might be a wild animal or something like that. Fear is what heightens our defenses so we can prepare ourselves against what might threaten us. Jim Fowler was my professor of psychology of religion, and he interviewed people of all ages about the religious faith. And he did with faith what Erik Erikson did with stages of development, looking at how people at different ages and different parts of their life conceive about God and the world around them. And he talked to kindergarten-age children. And he interviewed them and he asked them the question, what are you afraid of? And they would say, monsters and witches and dragons. And he would say to them, well, yes, but those things don't actually exist in your neighborhood. Wanting to know if they feared maybe the neighbor's dog or that bully that lived down the street. So what sorts of things make you afraid? Monsters and witches and dragons. And he learned, as other psychologists have learned, that for very small children, they can be just as afraid of what is imagined to them as they can of something that's actual. And then he made a connection to one of my favorite childhood books, Maurice Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are, where Max, who is a stubborn and disobedient child, is sent to his room, and he imagines going off to a fantastic land where he's surrounded by all of these magnificent beasts. And he learns to tame them and subdue them and eventually escape from them. Max is the child who learns to overcome the fears that exist within his own mind. Well, fear is a proper warning technique that God has given us. But if fear becomes the center of our lives, if fear becomes so powerful that it overtakes us, it makes us self-centered, it makes us judgmental, it makes us prejudiced, it produces sin. So fear has its place, but you and I are called to be people of faith. Pilgrims who sang and recited Psalm 121. The soldiers in David's army who may have recited it. They have fear in their lives, but they're told to have faith at the very center. A faith in a God that is specifically named as the God who created the heavens and the earth. A God who has always been and will always be. A God who knows very well what is around that corner, what is on the other side of that mountain, what is inside of our hearts, what is motivating us to do something or not do something else. That is the God that you and I come into deeper communion with during the season of Lent. As we encounter our fears, our discouragement, and what that does within us. Our hope and our confidence is in the God who made heaven and earth. Here's an exercise for you to try during the season of Lent. There are different ways of praying. And sometimes in my life, when I find my mind is just too busy and I need to get back to basics, I go to the format of praying that reflects what we do in worship on Sunday morning. Joys and concerns. First, what am I joyful about? No matter my fears or my apprehensions, I have reasons to be thankful. And list those. And then go through the concerns. Try not to be too specific with God. There are times we want to do that out of honesty, but I try to not treat God like a cosmic waiter who comes when I snap my fingers and wants something, but saying something just to lay it out first before myself so that I hear it for clarity and to know that God hears my concerns, God senses my fear, and God speaks to me. Throughout this season of Lent, when you find you are anxious, when you find you are fearful, take some time to go into your prayer closet and to verbalize what it is that has you concerned. Maybe it's physical health. Maybe it's finances. It might be a relationship that is harmful to you. It may be the nature of the country or the world in which we live. It may be that great and scary unknown that is on the other side of the mountain and around that corner. Name each one, and after each concern, say to yourself out loud, my help comes from the Lord. You may have an error. I am concerned about my health. My help comes from the Lord. You may have an error. I am concerned about finances. My help comes from the Lord. You may have an error. I am concerned about my loved one. My help comes from the Lord. You may have an error. I am concerned about my faith community. My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. I am concerned about my nation. My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. Today we are not here as soldiers, and we're not on some dusty mountain, but we are pilgrims. We are sojourners. We have concerns. We have fear. And our help comes from the Lord who made heaven.